on periodically. If you let them get too dry, you may have some thrips problems on those. But you know, when you slice an onion, you know all those rings that are inside of there. Every ring corresponds to one leaf. If you got 15, 20 healthy leaves on that onion, you're going to have 15, 20 rings in there, and you're going to have great big onions. You got 2 or 3 little skinny leaves on that onion, you're going to have a little bitty bulb with 2 or 3 rings. So keep the foliage on your onions as healthy as you possibly can.
I wanted to ask you about soil preparation when you put those in, or feeding them after you've put them in.
You know, I do the same thing as I do with the others. I'll put the fertilizer down, put some compost down a few weeks ahead of planting. But then, and I guess I should have said this really on everything, 6-8 weeks later, I'll either start feeding with a liquid fertilizer, or else I'll go back and throw some more dry fertilizer on. Yeah, that has to grow, or our natural solutions works real well.
Thank you.
Questions about onions? Okay.
But garlic, kind of the similar thing?
Garlic, it's very critical when you plant garlic. And the way you plant garlic is you plant the little individual cloves. Do it in November. October and November are the 2 months of the year that you plant garlic. And there are probably 300 different kinds of garlic you can plant. It'll be ready when the tops fall over in June. And garlic is a great crop. How they can charge the prices for it in the grocery store they do, I don't know. But garlic is one of the easiest things you can possibly grow.
How much water?
Really, with everything in the garden, thanks for coming, guys. Water really thoroughly when the soil's dry and knuckle deep. If you follow that rule, you'll never have a problem. I can't tell you how often, because that's going to depend on, you know, how hot it is, how windy it is, how sunny it is. But you want your plants to have a thorough watering every time the soil's dry, about 1 inch or 2 deep.
Is Medina Plus, how often should you use that in the garden?
Medina Plus is a bacterial activator and enhancer. It's not a fertilizer. And if your soil's in really good shape, you don't ever need to use it. If you're getting a new garden started and you want the best results, use it about every 6 weeks. Thank you for coming, sir. Use it about every 6 weeks. It's cheap and it'll never hurt anything. Certainly. Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to talk about potatoes, and then I guess I'll just you know, answer any questions that anybody has. But if you want to grow potatoes, potatoes are easy to grow, but it is time now to get them planted. Let's see, yeah, set this up here.
Y'all sell the potato seeds?
They're planted from actual potatoes. They're not planted from seeds. But we sell what are called seed potatoes. You know, nobody wants to have potatoes in their dish drainer that are starting to sprout. Used to be that before they sent the potatoes to the grocery store, they would subject them to very brief, very cold temperatures, and it would freeze and kill these little eyes before they could develop. That wasn't so bad, but nowadays they're actually chemically treating them to keep these little eyes from sprouting. Number one, I don't like the chemicals, and number two, I just don't like the way that they're doing it. So when you plant potatoes, you will normally plant what we call seed potatoes that we know have not been treated to keep the eyes from sprouting. This is kind of a little one. I usually plant slightly bigger potatoes, but when you plant them, you're going to cut them up in smaller pieces, and you're going to be sure that each piece has 1 or 2 eyes on it. I typically cut them in fourths. I'll usually plant 4 pieces from each potato. This one I might only cut in 2. A really big one I might cut in even more. That's the size potato. I'm usually going to whack it either 4 or 6 pieces. I'm just going to be sure that there are at least 2 eyes on each section. Sometimes you have to be a little creative as you whittle on them, but that works okay. Now, when you cut it, you're going to have exposed, fleshy, watery tissue there. It's good to kind of cauterize that. The 2 things that I use, I will either roll them in rock phosphate, powdered rock phosphate, or roll them in wood ashes. Either one of those things seem to work very well. Potatoes will grow as, you know, tuberous growths out along the roots. They're going to sprout, they're going to come up, they're going to make a top. We usually end up planting them in February. Sometimes they freeze down. They can freeze down 2 or 3 times and still come back out again and again. But I try to plant them, well, I planted mine Thursday. I might have been a week later by some people's standards, but like the meteorologist said, it's going to be colder a little bit longer, so I'm going to be planting a little bit later this year than I would most years. But I'll plant them about 18 inches apart. I'll plant them about 1 inch deep. and they come up and they make a real bushy, pretty plant. After a few weeks, if you look carefully at the soil, or if you take your soil and kind of wash, or take your hose and wash a little bit of the soil away from the base of the plant, you'll actually see developing potatoes on there. They'll be nice and smooth skin. They may be the size, maybe up to the size of a golf ball after 6 or 8 weeks. And if you want to, and I do this, go out and go around each plant, take your finger and reach down and pop out 1 or 2 little potatoes off that plant. There's just nothing much better than new potatoes, and so many different ways to fix them. And that's what you're getting, are the young, tender potatoes. And you can go ahead and take 2, 3 potatoes off of each plant without really hurting the plant or hurting your later production. If you wait until later in the season, of course, the potatoes will be much larger. But the trick about growing potatoes is you have to decide, do I want a potato that I can eat fresh like a new potato, or do I want a potato that I can store away with my onions and it's still going to be good, 2, 3, 4 months from now? If you harvest the potatoes with a green top on them, they're going to be thin skinned and they're not going to keep. They're going to be delicious, but they're not going to keep. If you want potatoes that are going to keep, you either go through and cut the top off, or else you wait for the top to die naturally, which it will do in early summer, and wait about 2 weeks before you dig them up. If they stay in the ground for about 2 weeks, after the top is gone, whether you cut it off or whether it died, they develop a tough skin. This is the way nature protects them. In nature, nobody digs them. They just sit there and sprout out the next year and the whole process starts over. But if you want potatoes that you can store, cut the tops off or let the tops die and wait 2 to 3 weeks before you dig them. Then they will have a tougher skin, and if you store them cool and dry, they will keep for a long, long time. Yes?
Would be the same way with sweet potatoes?
Sweet potatoes are a whole different story. Sweet potatoes, we plant those as what we call slips. You go to the store, sweet potatoes are not treated. You go to the store, you get that sweet potato. Some people will stick some toothpicks in it and set it down in a jar of water. We all did this as kids. The vines come out and grow everywhere. Some people will put it in a little bed of sand or something. But where those vines come out, you can take a very sharp knife and you cut a little section of tissue out of the potato along with the vine, and that is what is referred to as a slip. And then you go out and plant the slips in the garden. And each of those, you better plant them a substantial distance apart, because they get big. They grow like a weed. And the potatoes will develop on the roots of those, just as they do on the others. But unlike this kind of potato, the sweet potato will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger as long as you leave it in the ground. And if you leave them in for a long, long period of time, you will have big sweet potatoes. Biggest sweet potato I think I've seen weighed 65 pounds.
So each slip just makes one?
No, each slip will make multiple potatoes. And they like loose soil. But in an area the size of the floor right here, gosh, I wouldn't plant more than maybe 6 slips in the whole area. And I would go back and start digging in the middle of the summer. And you'll find nice medium-sized sweet potatoes. If you let them go till late in the fall, the average one's probably going to weigh 6 or 8 pounds.
How deep?
This kind of potato is going to be within 3 or 4 inches of the surface. Sweet potatoes may be as much as 6 to 10 inches down.
If you leave them for a long period of time, will it affect the flavor?
It affects your ability to bake them. Not everybody's oven's big enough. And they do get a little tougher. I won't say it really affects the flavor, but it certainly affects the texture.
So sweet potatoes plant 6 to 10 inches down?
No, plant the slips right on top, but when you dig the potatoes, you're going to be digging deeper.
Okay.
And we don't plant sweet potatoes until the weather's hot. Sweet potatoes we plant in April and May.
Okay.
These potatoes we plant in February. Yes, sir.
Well, how much that little eye has to be showing before you plant the potato, before you cut it?
None.
As long as you see it.
You can see it. When I planted, probably 2/3 of them, you couldn't even see the eye beginning to develop.
Because I got some and they're just...
Yeah, I like to do it before the eyes get very big, because they bust off too easily if you let them get
What
very big.
about, sorry, now, I tried to grow potatoes in a container,
Uh-huh.
and actually a trash can, I bought a new trash can, a trash can. But I noticed I got a lot of gnats.
You're keeping them too wet. You're having gnats in the soil, you're watering too often. If you want to get rid of them, These same nematodes will take care of the gnat larvae, but if you're having fungus gnats, you're keeping the soil too wet and your potatoes are gonna rot.
But how do you know, because I had always read, and even on the internet, like 1 to 2 inches. That, you know, I mean, you let that completely dry out and then,
I go to the 2-inch end of it on potatoes.
okay.
And remember, it's not how much